So, what a contrast to President Trump, who is monolingual and America first. And here, our new Pope couldn't be more internationalist. And so, those two men, in so many ways, couldn't be more diametrically opposed. In this time of MAGA and America first and bullying other nations, let's find an American who's as internationalist as possible. And there we have it in Pope Leo XIV.
That was Dr. Andrew Chesnut, a religious studies professor at Virginia Commonwealth University. And this is Epicenter NYC. We connect our communities to news, information, and each other. I'm your host, Ambar Castillo. It's been less than 2 weeks since Pope Leo XIV was elected, but the whirlwind of conversation around him makes it feel like he's been Pope for much longer. In case you don't know, Pope Leo XIV was born in the US, spent decades in Peru, and speaks 5 languages. He's the first Pope with an X account, formerly Twitter, and he's posted about immigration, peace, and even JD Vance. As you can probably tell, his election is bringing up big questions, not just about the church, but about identity and what it means to be American right now. To unpack some of this, I sat down with 2 experts who are thinking deeply about this moment. Dr. Hosffman Ospino, a professor at Boston College who studies the intersection of culture, Catholicism, and Hispanic communities, and Dr. Andrew Chesnut, who you heard earlier. Before we jump in, a quick message from our team.
Hi, I'm Mariana from the Epicenter NYC team with a quick health update. Flu, RSV, COVID, and stomach viruses are creating an epidemic, making public spaces, including schools, virus hotspots. Watch for norovirus symptoms like vomiting, RSV's sneezing and congestion, and the flu's high fevers and fatigue. Hydration, rest, and staying home when sick help keep families healthy. Protect your community. Wash your hands, clean surfaces, and keep up with vaccines. Need more info? Email hello@epicenter-nyc.com or text 917-818-2690.
Now back to the show. Here's my conversation with Dr. Ospino.
Professor Hosffman Ospino, and I am a professor of theology and religious education at Boston College Klaus School of Theology and Ministry, where I am also the chair of the Department of Religious Education and Pastoral Ministry.
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit first about how you got into this field, especially the intersections of faith culture and Hispanic Catholics.
Well, I am an immigrant, and I came to the United States of America to study theology. And as I was studying theology, I became increasingly aware of the reality of how Hispanics and immigrants from Latin America and the Spanish-speaking Caribbean were transforming Catholicism in the United States. I began doing some research into that. And what really got me interested in this, again, is that experience of being Latino, being Catholic, myself being one of those immigrants who is part of the transformation.
I'm curious about your reaction when you first heard Cardinal Robert Prevost was elected Pope and that he had taken the name Leo XIV.
I was very excited. I'm a Catholic who believes in the importance of the Second Vatican Council, the importance of being Catholics who are engaged in the world, committed to questions of justice, bringing Christ to the people who are most in need. And when Pope Leo XIV began to speak about these matters, and he said that he wanted to be someone who wants to advocate for peace, for immigrants, for those who are experiencing injustice, it connected me to the message of the gospel, and that gives me hope.
And there's been a lot of excitement among other Latinos, including folks who aren't so religious, about Pope Leo's connection to Peru. What do you make of that excitement?
I tend to see Pope Leo as someone like myself. You know, I was born in a different country in Latin America, have lived in the United States. This society has embraced me, but there are moments when this society doesn't fully embrace me, and there are aspects of the society that I do not fully share. Nonetheless, I am part of this society. And I think that that's the case with Pope Leo. I believe that he is a North American pope. I mean, we need to begin with that. Even though he's a North American pope who has Afro-Caribbean roots and he has Spanish roots, but he also has European roots. So this is someone who represents a lot of the diversity that shapes our society. This being a country of immigrants. But at the same time, there is a lot of excitement, and I do feel excited about the fact that he is someone who has been shaped pastorally by working with people in Latin America, particularly in Peru, and someone who actually understands the ecclesial realities of Latin America, who understands the society, the language, the culture where many of the people who are transforming Catholicism in the United States live. I think that those connections, whether it is because of the pastoral work or because of what he represents or because of his citizenship in Peru and in the United States, that in a sense prompt people to say, he is one of us. And I think that, yes, he belongs to all. And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, that's another thing I was curious about, if there's anything that you see under the vision that Pope Leo has expressed so far that you think would also create opportunities for the church in the U.S. to reach out to Latino Catholics who feel distant or other kinds of immigrants.
One of the facts about Catholicism in the United States of America is that about 25% of all Catholics in this country are immigrant. And when you look at the Latino community, about half of all Hispanic Catholics are immigrants, or no? I think that the message of someone like Pope Leo, when he calls about respecting the dignity, affirming the dignity of migrants and refugees, resonates with the immigrant community and many others as well, people who advocate on behalf of the immigrants, particularly at a time in which we have political movements, we have social movements that are anti-immigrant, anti-refugee, that demonize otherness and so on. So that's an opportunity for those communities to affirm that. But Pope Leo also is someone who, right at the outset, said that being Catholic, is about caring or taking care of the created order, the planet where we live, taking care of the water, taking care of everything. And that resonates very much with the younger generations. It should resonate with anybody, because at the end of the day, if you don't take care of where we live, there will not be planet at all for anyone. And that's it, whether you're young or old. But I think that he resonates, with the younger generation. I think that we need a movement of young people, young women and men everywhere saying, these are my values and this is what I care for. I want to see more young Catholics, standing firmly for certain points and say, this is what I care. And I want my priests, I want my bishops, and I want my Pope to also stand for those particular issues.
I'm wondering if you could also speak to that decision for Pope Leo to take on the name Leo, right? Which relates to some of the social justice issues you just talked about, or that sense of being the protector defender, and what this might signal to Latinos and working class Catholics.
Yes, the name Leo, certainly among popes, it's closely related to the legacy of Pope Leo XIII, who was elected in the 19th century, right at the time when the Industrial Revolution was generating a lot of questions, when people were being pulled into factories to work anonymously and being exploited, working 10, 12, 15, 16 hours, people dying on the job. So this capitalism that was driving the Industrial Revolution raised a lot of questions for people of faith. Pope Leo the 13th, writes an encyclical called Rerum Novarum, of new things. What he does is he just brings attention to the rights of people, to the idea of rights and the idea of organizing, to the idea of treating everybody with dignity. In modern times, he kind of sets in motion a set of reflections that today are called Catholic social teaching. So when we have a pope, who chooses Leo the 14th, I don't think that he has an obligation to be a social justice pope, you know. Nonetheless, he knows that there is this legacy, you know, with Leo the 13th begins and sets the world afire on this idea of being Catholics, being Christians, who not only care about being in relationship with God, but also being in relationship with others, you know, in a way that in ways that are just, in ways that are true, in ways that are good. So it seems to me that Pope Leo XIV, you know, is someone who wants to do something similar, particularly at a time in which the world is in much upheaval today. You know, I mean, look at the wars that are taking place, the constant threat of nuclear catastrophe, the anti-immigrant movements, anti-refugee movements everywhere. He's also thinking about artificial intelligence, you know, and how artificial intelligence can literally dehumanize us. I mean, and he's already hinted at that, you know, in this world of turmoil, in this world of upheavals, the church, the Christian community, the Catholic community needs to come forward and bring the message of the gospel. So I think that in that sense, he might follow the legacy of Leo the 13th, but he will do it through the lens of the Second Vatican Council, the pontificates of the recent popes, you know, and of course, you know, following in the footsteps of Pope Francis.
I'm wondering what you'll be watching for in the Pope's early months, especially regarding his relationship with Latinos.
I think that his messages on immigration will be very pointed to what is happening in the United States of America, the dynamics that we see unfolding in you know, in our government, you know, with mass deportations and the way that, you know, many refugee programs have been terminated and so on. So I think that some of the messages will hit home and rather intentionally because it's going to compel us. And in that sense, the Latino community may feel affirmed, you know, particularly those who are immigrants or who have relatives who are immigrants.
After studying Hispanic Catholics for years, is there anything else that gives you hope about the future, especially with this new pope?
Well, I just hope that, you know, he will be a pope that continues to create bridges between Catholicism in the United States of America, which is increasingly Hispanic, and Catholicism in Latin America, Catholicism in the Caribbean, Catholicism in Spain, and other parts of the world. I want a pope that is a bridge builder, you know, and I want his papacy to inspire us as Catholics, as Hispanic Catholics in the United States, not to close our doors to what is happening, but to be more in collaboration, you know, to be more attentive to what happens in the rest of the continent and the Caribbean.
I also sat down with Dr. Andrew Chesnut. He explores how Pope Leo fits into a changing church and a changing America.
I am Dr. Andrew Chesnut. I'm professor of religious studies and also hold a chair in Catholic studies at Virginia Commonwealth University.
In your article, you mentioned, right, how the new pope is seen as the least American of the Americans because of all his time in Peru and his embrace of Andean traditions, Afro-Peruvian traditions. How do you think his background resonates with immigrant communities?
Initial reactions among Latinos in the United States have been very enthusiastic. You know, there's been a lot of memes and folks showing him in their different national or regional soccer jerseys. Peruvians, especially, elated about it since he's also Peruvian citizenship, holds dual citizenship. More specifically, in being the least American of the American Cardinals, he really unites the Americas. Because, you know, there's some analysts out there who love to make this huge dichotomy between the US and Latin America. But in so many regards, we are interrelated. And if you include the United States and Canada, half of the 1.4 billion Catholics in the world reside here in the Americas.
There's a sense, what I was getting from your piece and from a couple others, is that he has this outsider status still in US church politics. But at the same time, part of the decision to choose him seemed to be around like he hasn't really been in politics in the same way in the US. But then there's also this other side of him that has been at least vocal in some ways on social media on this. So if you could kind of speak about that, whether there's tension there or what you make of that.
Even more conservative bishops in the United States have been very critical of Trump's policy of mass deportations. And that's only natural because, almost 40% of the Catholic Church here are Hispanics. So, the majority of people being deported are Catholic. This depletes their numbers in a church that's already lost members. That is, I think, a has been a rallying cry for all pretty American bishops, really, no matter what their political bent, which for me has also been interesting because I think there's no doubt that the majority of American bishops, supported the Trump campaign, particularly because he was in line with their hot button issues of abortion and all of that, right? Trump made pretty clear that he was angling for mass deportation. So this shouldn't have been a surprise to the leadership of the church, but here they are now up in arms. So our new pope is very much in sync with that because there really isn't division there. His latest records show that his latest voting has been Republican. All to say that I think in this first week so far, I think, he's shaping up probably politically as maybe more centrist than Pope Francis. But he's also come out and said he's very much in favor of, the reforms, the great reforms that happened in Vatican II during the 1960s, that the church should be an even stronger champion working on the nefarious effects of climate change. I think on many of these social issues, he's basically the same as Pope Francis. Yeah, and only time will tell because 'cause we're not even a week into his papacy, right?
Yeah, I'm wondering what surprised you the most about the reaction to Pope Leo's election, or were you expecting this?
No, no, I pretty much nobody was expecting this, but I think when we quickly learned about who he was, it makes sense too, because even the conservative American cardinals rallied around him.
Once he was elected, did anything surprise you about the reaction from different communities to his election?
Obviously, the MAGA folks, are calling him a Marxist and communist, and I expected that. So what a contrast to President Trump, who is monolingual and America first. And here our new pope couldn't be more internationalist. He's a polyglot. His own, DNA is diverse. And so those two men in so many ways, couldn't be more diametrically opposed. And so I think that was also part of the impetus in this time of MAGA and America first and bullying other nations. Oh, we're going to take Greenland, we're going to take Panama, that this is also a reaction to this. Let's find an American who's as internationalist as possible. And there we have it in Pope Leo XIV.
What do you think that also signals about the possible future direction of the Catholic Church in multicultural contexts, especially in
Oh,
cities?
yeah, I think it will just accelerate because as much as a globetrotter, open to other nationalities as Pope Francis was, he didn't speak English. And, the one country I think he had the biggest problem relating to was the United States. I think with our new Pope Leo, we'll see somebody who's perhaps more savvy, and has the linguistic skill set that Pope Francis didn't.
Are there any initial thoughts on whether that could change a little bit of the proportion of Latinos who are now nuns or who at least have moved away from the Catholic Church?
I'm a historian by training, so you're asking me to get my crystal ball, but I'll do it for you. So, actually, one of the big flaws of Pope Francis was, in large measure, he was elected as the first Latin American pope because millions have left the church for Pentecostalism in Latin America since the 1970s. And during his 12-year papacy, that continued apace. He did nothing. Even in his native Argentina, Catholic membership declined by like 8 or 9 points in his home country. And so I think we will see a new emphasis on missionary work and evangelization that was pretty much absent during Pope Francis. Pope Francis really didn't care about, sending people to knock on doors and try to bring back lapsed Catholics. And so I suspect that, particularly because the new pope was a missionary in Peru, that we will see a new emphasis on evangelization.
Is there anything about Pope Leo's background you think the media or the public are missing that could also resonate with communities or that is also
Yeah,
important?
there's been a lot of questions on, what is he going to do about women in the church and LGBTQ plus. There's been some accusations that he engaged in some cover up of sex abuse cases. He's come out against the ordination having female priests, but he seems like he possibly could be open to having female deacons. Just like Pope Francis, he's opposed to what they call gender ideology. In fact, he made some statement opposing that in the public schools in Peru. But people change. This just because that's the path. For example, Pope Francis, as Pope, very much gravitated toward liberation theology. So he really kind of shifted toward the left as Pope because we see these statements from him as a bishop and cardinal doesn't mean that he's not going to move in a different direction either.
So, what kind of pope will Leo XIV be? It's too early to say, but already he's opening up space for people who don't always see themselves in the church. For immigrants, for young people, for those living at the intersection of many identities. To learn more and follow our stories at these intersections of politics, culture, and identity, make sure to sign up for a free newsletter. And if today's episode resonated with you, share it with a friend. We'd also love to hear from you. Leave us a review or reach out to us at hello@epicenter-nyc.com. That's all for today. Thanks for listening and thanks for supporting us as we do our best to support our community. We couldn't do it without you. Our intro music is All the Pretty Horses by Caravika. You can find more of their music on their website, linked to in our podcast description.